So without further ado, Suzanna, thank you. First one up. Thank you.
So before I start, I'd like to thank my 4 committee members for really going through this with me, bearing with me, 7:30 meetings, and when I messed up ABC order on all my works cited pages. So Mr. Herstein, Ms. Anton, Coach Platt, and Ms. Clarkson. So now moving into my topic, I first like to talk about why I chose conformity. I don't know if you guys know, my title is Conformity, the Desire for Societal Acceptance. So when we were choosing our topics last year, Mr. Herstein said we'd start in January, and they didn't give us any information on how to choose the topics. Pick something you think you can write 30 pages about. It's like, all right. So I had a lot of trouble finally settling on one. I think I may have been like the last one to choose the topic, but it all turned out okay. I bounced around several ideas before I landed on the topic of facade. I thought I might be able to delve into the topic of masks in literature, but when I was researching secondary sources, I found that there wasn't enough information to really write. So I went back after searching through JSTOR, Bloom, even the TEL, which I had never used before, and I still have not. I knew I needed to change something, so I then decided to modify my topic, and I used the broader form of conformity. After I began researching conformity and really thinking about it, I started to embrace it because I saw that, especially in the high school setting, you can see it everywhere. When I was thinking about it, I thought conformity, it's really everywhere if you look around. Our uniforms here, for example, and then even more with uniforms. Our shirts and skirts are pretty regulated, but what's not is our shoes. And I don't know if you've walked around here anywhere, but I'd say 75% of girls are wearing saddle Oxford, myself included. I wear them every day. And I actually had a friend here up until 10th grade. She wore saddle Oxfords every single day, never changed. But when she moved school, she found that no one else really wore these saddle Oxfords, so she stopped. It was a natural instinct. She didn't want to really be different at a new school. It's a casual example of conformity, but I think it really demonstrates it. It's why I ended up settling on conformity as a topic. It's so common and it is everywhere. I thought it would really be interesting to see conformity on different backgrounds, different ages, different races, and different sexes. So after choosing my topic, I'd like to talk about the writing process and really speak about my sources that I use. I already mentioned that we talked about our topics in junior year, but after that, we wrote an annotated bid with all our secondary sources. That was a rough night, I do remember. I was up pretty late. But after that, when we had everything settled, we wrote a rough outline. I was pretty lucky. A lot of people's outlines really changed throughout the year, but mine stayed pretty consistent. I remember we were supposed to choose a title, and I said conformity and how it relates to acceptance. So it stayed pretty constant because that's pretty much still my title. And then throughout the year, it stayed consistent, and I had my primaries set by July, which was actually very fortunate. For my primaries, we were supposed to use 5, minimum 5. So naturally, I used 5 and 5 only. Anthem by Ayn Rand shows the effect of a collectivist and dystopian community on a free-thinking individual who is ironically named Equality. Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro is also a dystopian environment, but it really differs from Anthem because of the effect it has on our narrator, Kathy. She never truly stands up for her rights, and she kind of just complies with society's standards that are laid out for her. The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison illustrates the effects of conformity on a young black girl named Piccola. Piccola lives in a white-dominated society, and really her goal in life is just to be accepted by that society. And I have The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald, and to me, that really showed the desire to conform has different motivators. Gatsby really models his life around gaining acceptance from Daisy, and Daisy models her life around gaining acceptance from society, so it's kind of a cycle. And finally, I used The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. Now, these previous 4 books I mentioned I'd read before. I read most of them in junior year, except for Anthem, which I read in Miss Hawk's class. And Miss Clark had suggested it to me. I I'd never heard of it, but I said, let's give it a shot. So in the summer, I read it, thinking this is pretty great. I'll definitely use that. And to me, it really plays into the dystopian society, which like Anthem and Never Let Me Go, like I mentioned. But Offred, the main character, she accepts her society's conformist tendencies at first, but she later deviates from these tendencies because she has a desire to see her family and she desires freedom once again. So in order to help me use my primaries, I also had to use some secondaries, and I needed some background on the study of conformity that I could use as a secondary source. And Miss Anton really helped me with this psychology. I know where she is. She really helped me. She told me a lot, and she told me there's one, if you use anything, there's one study you need to use, and it was conducted by Solomon Asch. This experiment tested the extent of conformity within a group. It tested individuals to see if they would yield to group standards. In each test, 5 of 6 individuals were told they were in an experiment, but this 6th individual was never told that he was in it. The other 5, they were told when to answer correctly, when to answer incorrectly, but the lone 6th individual never had any idea. Asch found that the degree of conformity when the group answered incorrectly was relatively high. 37% of trials featured subjects that just went along with the group, even if the group gave a wrong answer. These individuals who ended up matching the group's response, whether they agreed or not, they really overall gave 2 reasons for conforming to the group. One was that the group was able to change the individual's mind, physically altering what he truly thinks. And then secondly, the individual knew the group was wrong, but he didn't really want to disagree with them. He didn't want to go against their beliefs. And this experiment is actually conducted in the 1970s, but it's nearly 40 years later, and it's still a landmark study and still used quite often when talking about conformity. It shows to me that conforming has been, is, and will always be part of society. So now moving into my paper, I really covered 3 main topics when I was writing it. My chapter titles are Herd Mentality, Fear as it drives the conformist, and Conformity as a product of environmental influence. So now moving into herd mentality. In my paper, I define herd mentality as the behavior implemented by an individual whose sole purpose is to match a group's standards and conduct. In this chapter, I prove that the herd is what accepts or rejects a person. The person has no say in his acceptance. He can only alter himself in hopes of gaining acceptance from this herd. And one of the examples I used was in Piccola from the Blue Side. She's what the herd doesn't accept. She's ostracized by the herd because she's so far from its accepted type of the blonde-haired, blue-eyed, beautiful white girl. Piccola's young, she has a dysfunctional family, and she's black. She has no other option with this. But she believes simply having blue eyes will fix her lack of acceptance. She says, this is a quote, if she looked different, beautiful, maybe they'd say, why look at pretty-eyed Piccola. We mustn't do bad things in front of those pretty eyes. Each night without fail, she prayed for blue eyes. And now, fear as it drives the conformist. That was the 4th chapter I did. So in this chapter, I kind of proved that the fear of being isolated from a society or a lifestyle is what really drives the character to conform. And one character I used here was Daisy from The Great Gatsby. Daisy embodies fear as it drives someone to conform. If you'll remember, there are 2 places in New York that take place in The Great Gatsby. There's the West Egg, which is new money, and it's kind of a joke to those of the prestigious. East Egg, which is full of old money, it's full of wealth, it's full of prestige, and it's what Daisy is so desperate to have. Tom Buchanan, Daisy's husband, is really the physical representation of this prestige. Even though Daisy strays from Tom to be with Gatsby for a little bit of time, she still returns to Tom in the end because she fears losing the status that is hand in hand with the money, with his money. And now I'd like to move into conformity as a product of environmental influence. In this chapter, I really proved that environmental influence shape a character's actions, and often these actions are detrimental to the character. In one part of this chapter, I compared the effects of environment on Piccola and Gatsby. Piccola, as I said earlier, just wants to be accepted into her society. The Society, though, treasures the appearance of beautiful white girls, an appearance she'll never have due to her race. Gatsby, though, desires acceptance from Daisy, just as Piccola desires beauty. He alters his entire life around gaining Daisy's approval. He moves to USJ, but this is an area built on new money, like I said earlier. He'll never have the prestige that Daisy desires to have. So I'm about to read a passage from my paper, and it really compares the effects of Piccola and Gatsby's environments in their attempts to conform to society. So I said, ultimately, the desires of Piccola and Gatsby break them. Piccola loses her sanity searching for the blue eyes and beauty that elude her. Claudia McTeer speaks about Piccola and says, she, however, stepped over into madness, a madness which protected her from us simply because it bored us in the end. Gatsby dies tragically after Daisy leaves town with Tom, and he never has Daisy as his own, not even at his funeral. Nick says, I can only remember without resentment that Daisy hadn't sent a message or a flower. The environments of both Piccola and Gatsby are what lead to their conformity and ultimately their downfalls. Their need for acceptance, driven by their environments, is overwhelming, and it drives their actions until neither has anything left. So now to really conclude this presentation, I'd like to wrap up my overall reflection of conformity and of my writing process. So overall, in my paper, I think I really proved that conforming to gain acceptance to society is a phenomenon that appears in many places. It appears in children, teens, adults, all alike. For example, peer pressure. I know you've all seen it. It alters the actions of hundreds of thousands of people, young and old, every day. Conformity is even prevalent in the communities in which we live. Suburbs are the definition of sameness. The lawns are the same, the family dynamic is nearly identical, and conformity appears to be everywhere. If people are surrounded by it every day, how are we supposed to escape it? It's the true entrepreneurs who really oppose conformity. Where would we be today without the groundbreaking technological movements of Bill Gates and Steve Jobs? They're the ideal pictures of the nonconformist. However, this nonconformity is difficult. It's why there are not more people like Bill Gates or Steve Jobs, because as long as there is a desire to be a part of society, so will the desire to conform. And now to really conclude my presentation, I'd like to reflect on my writing process over the past year. I think for me overall, I definitely became a better writer. At the beginning of the year, I was struggling to get the paper in on time. In fact, when chapter 1 was due, I nearly missed the deadline to turn it in. On the night it was due, it was summer, and we were at a soccer tournament in Nashville. It's just us two in a room because the rest of the team had the luxury of going to eat. Summer had been a bit more diligent than I had, and she'd finished with ample time to turn it in. I, on the other hand, did not have the same experience. While Summer was sitting there, calmly eating fajitas, I was thinking, A, why did I not do more time? Why did I not do more when I had the time? And B, why did I not order fajitas? By 11:59, I had turned in my paper, but it was not my best work, and I swore to myself I would not let that happen again. But then chapter 2 came. And chapter 2 went just as fast. I also turned that in at 11:59. This time, chapter 3, I decided things had to be a little bit different. So that's really when things turned around for me in the writing process. I attempted to ditch my procrastination, and as a result, I turned in early what I think was my best chapter. I gave myself time to synthesize and make my paper flow the way I really wanted it to. So overall, I think this writing process is pretty overwhelming, I think you can imagine. But looking back, I think the time and effort I put into this paper really shows, and I'm really happy with my final work. So with that, are there any questions?
Suzanna, I want to say that it was a pleasure to sit on your committee, and we did see a lot of growth from the first chapter to the final product, which was outstanding. And so I just want to compliment you on that. My question has to do with your primary sources. And which one of your primaries do you think best relates to your topic?
Okay, I think for me, the blue this eye in Piccola, it really kind of embodies the idea of conformity as it relates to acceptance. Piccola is completely ostracized by her community simply because of her race and her appearance. She believes that by becoming beautiful, she will achieve the acceptance that she desires. She thinks that just by receiving blue eyes, that her acceptance will be in reach. But in reality, this acceptance is never something she can attain.